Hi everyone. I'm going to do something a little bit different for these field trips. I'm going to give a little introduction here while I'm in my office. I visited a local named Clark Kelly Price, who just so happens to be a famous Western cowboy artist. He's been painting since the 1970s, sells his work in galleries all over the place, sends his work out, original and prints, all over the world. You can find him on social media. He has a website. He'll talk about that in these videos. I'm giving an introduction because I'm breaking up his field trip into multiple parts because we met so long. I went and met him in his studio. He showed us some great works. The first field trip, he's going to kind of just tell us his story. He was sitting there painting when I walked in, and I just kind of sat down and we started chatting about his life. So there's a lot of talking in the first video. But then he starts showing us a work that he up on his easel and talking about his process. And then in the second field trip, he'll take us all through the studio and just kind of talk through a whole bunch of things. I hope you enjoy this field trip. I loved my visit with Clark Kelly Price, and if you love his work, look him up online and order a print or something. He's a good guy, interesting life, and beautiful work there that he produces out of his studio. So enjoy the field trip. All right, everybody, we're here with the artist Clark Kelly Price in his studio. We're going to ask him a bunch of questions and have him show us his work, and he might even do a little painting for us while we're here. But Mr. Price, how did you tell us about who you are and like where you're from and how you got into art?
Okay, well, my name is Clark Kelly Price. The Kelly is from my mom's maiden name. She was a Kelly. She was raised in Idaho Falls, and I'm from Idaho Falls. I was born and raised there as well. I lived in Montana when I was a little kid. We moved from Idaho Falls up into Montana and lived there, and came from a family of 11 children, and so I went to high school in Idaho Falls, and served a mission for the LDS Church in the Fiji Islands back in the 60s, 64 to 66. And so I had a great experience there, and came back, went to college, majored in art, served a little time in the Army, and got back into art after that, and I've been painting for a living since 1973, I think, is when I switched over I was working construction, and switched over from construction into art full-time about 1973.
So 47, 48 years?
Yeah.
You've been a full-time artist.
Yeah. So.
What brought you to Wyoming?
My wife. Actually, I was living in Swan Valley to the north of here, about 50 miles in Idaho, and I was building a log cabin down there, and I bought some property there and wanted to build a log cabin. My dad and mom built a log cabin after World War II, and that was up in Montana. That's when we moved to Montana when I was a little boy. And so I always wanted to build a log cabin, so I did. So I bought some property in Idaho, and at that time I was living in Utah, and but I bought 10 acres in Swan Valley, and I always loved Swan Valley. We spent a lot of time in Swan Valley when I was a kid, and so I bought some property there, and I went and got a permit from the forest, went and cut all my trees down and drug them out with my horses, and built me a log cabin. But
is it still standing?
My parents had moved from Utah. They were living in Utah after they moved from Idaho Falls, but Dad had a kind of a desire to get out of there, and looked around and found some property up here in Star Valley. So he started building a house up here. So while I was building down there, so I would come up on Friday and Saturday and help him on his house, and stayed over one weekend to go to church with him, and met this girl, and boom, boom, boom. So
the rest is history.
yeah, so she talked me into, after we got married, she talked me into staying here. So we sold the property down there, which I really didn't want to do.
Yeah, that'd be hard.
But she didn't either, but we couldn't figure out how to pay for two houses at the same time. So.
Yeah. Is that house still standing that you built?
Oh yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm still jealous. Every time I go by there, I want to go in my house.
That you built with your own hands.
Yeah. So that's the way that went.
Well, tell us a little bit about your history with art. I mean, how'd you get into it? Who trained you? All that stuff.
Okay, well, my mother tells me that I liked to draw and do art from the earliest memories that she has of me when I got old enough to hold a pencil or whatever. She says I always liked to draw and do things like that. And she always tells the story about I came down in the basement one day. She was doing the laundry down there, and I asked her for a pencil and a paper so I could draw a picture. And she was busy, so she said, "We'll go upstairs, and in Dad's office there's some paper and a pencil and so forth." And so I find that. Well, when she came up, she couldn't find me, and I was gone. So she got nervous and started looking around for me, and she saw through the window the neighbor lady bringing me over from her house with her hand tightly on my ear. She was pretty upset. So when she came, she says, "Catherine," she says, "your boy has been drawing pictures all over my newly painted house." So Mom says, "Well, what were you doing that for?" And of course, I can't remember doing this, but she says, "Well, I told her that I couldn't find the paper and I couldn't find the pencil, but I found a black crayon. And I saw Mrs. Border's house was all white and looked really nice. And so I thought I'd draw there. So I drew pictures all over the side of the painted house. So that's how I got into art. I guess it was just a natural instinct that I had.
Painting houses.
Yeah, painting houses. And so that's what happened there. And then I got in high school. I liked art. I painted my first oil painting when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And it was a Western. I had learned about Charlie Russell by then, and I loved Charlie Russell's paintings. I just was mesmerized by it. So I tried to paint a painting like Charlie Russell. I painted a mountain man on horseback with leading a pack horse up a mountain, and it turned out pretty good. I was pretty excited, and the smell of the paint, the turpentine, the whole thing just clicked with me, and I just it pulled me in. So I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So
I've been to the C.M. Russell Museum up in Montana many years ago. I loved being up there.
Yeah, they had to kick me out of there. I was first one in, last one out. Yeah.
So I guess after you said you were in the Army a little bit and so forth, and then you just dove into the world of art, I guess. How'd that happen?
Well, I went to college and majored in art, and really liked it. And just from there, I just decided that I wanted to try to paint paintings and sell them in these art galleries that were around the country. And I wasn't that far from Jackson Hole, and so I thought, well, I'm going to try up there. So I went up there and looked at all the art galleries. I found the one that I thought was the best art gallery, and I thought I'm going to paint some paintings and take them in there and see if I can sell them. So I painted 4 paintings. It took me about a year to paint 4 paintings that I thought were good enough to maybe sell in Jackson. So I did them, and that spring I was on a roundup up in Montana, and so after roundup, I had taken the paintings with me to show the boss's wife because she liked my art, and so I took them up there. So coming home from the roundup, I thought, well, I'll just stop in Jackson, and I've got them with me, and this is the right time. So I just went in there. I didn't take the paintings in, but I went in there, and I was really kind of sheepish around, or trying to introduce myself as an artist. So I was just looking at the art, and finally this one woman, she says, "You must be an artist." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" She says, "Well, because you are studying these paintings, like you really want to know everything about them." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing." And she says, "Well, do you paint?" And I said, "Yeah, I paint." I says, "I would love to show you some of my art, you know." And she says, "Well, we jury in March." Well, this was like the end of June. And I thought, oh man, wait till March, you know. And she says, "Yeah, we only jury in March, so bring your paintings in March, and we'll look at your art." So I thought, okay, well, that's that. So anyway, the guy that owned the gallery, he just came walking in after that, and he was smoking a big cigar and a big booming voice, and Brownie, that was her name. She says, Brownie, she says, Brownie says, "Bill," she says, "I want to introduce you to a young artist. His name is Clark Price." And so she introduced me to him, and so we were talking a little bit, and he says, "Well, do you have any art with you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I got 4 paintings down in my truck." And he says, "Well, bring them up. Let's take a look at it." So I bypassed the March deal, and got them up there, and he lined them up against the wall, and studied him for quite a long time. And I didn't know what he was going to say or anything, but he says, "How much you got to have for that one?" And it just shocked me. I wasn't ready for that, you know. So I just swallowed hard, and I thought, now I got to act like I know what I'm doing, you know. So I said, 200 for that one. And he says, "And how much for that one?" And I went up on that one at 250. So altogether it was $450, which was more money than I'd ever made on anything in my life as far as my art was concerned. So he just pulled his checkbook out and wrote a check.
Wow.
And he says, "Go home and paint everything you can paint and send it to me." He says, "I can sell your art." I said, you know, like, well, is this the way this happens, you know? And I says, "Well, I gotta, you know, I'm working construction, and so I can only paint a little bit, you know." But he says, "Well, quit your job." He says, "Paint full time." I said, "I don't think I can do that." He says, "Yeah, you can." He says, "That's what you ought to be doing, is painting these westerns." So he says, "If you need money, give me a call and I'll advance you a check on your next sale." This guy was talking turkey, you know. He wasn't beating around the bush. So I says, "Okay, well." So I took off, and I floated out of there. I was like off the ground. And I called my mom in Idaho Falls, and I says, "You're not going to believe what happened here today." I told her, and she was so excited. But so that's what I did. That's how I got started. And seemed like I was forever calling Bill and asking him for an advance on my next sale. But every time I took a painting up there, he'd sell it. Just couldn't believe it. I took paintings up there, and he had them sold before I got back to Utah, where I was living. He called me and said, "Oh, I sold that one. Get some more up here." So that's how it all started.
That's awesome.
His name was Bill Jensen, and he He ran the Jensen Galleries in Jackson, which I think was the best gallery in Jackson at that time. It merged later with Trailside Gallery, so I got grandfathered into Trailside Gallery that way.
So you still sell through them?
I'm still with Trailside, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I guess dive into the tools of the trade and maybe some of the art, and we can start showing the kids how this is done.
Okay. Well, a lot of artists stand when they paint. I can't stand. I got some injured legs, and so I can't stand up and paint. So I sit down, and I get this nice, comfortable chair, and I got my palette here. Whoops. And I got my music here I can listen to. I got all my brushes, my turpentine, and so I'm all set. And I just sit here and I paint, and that's how I do it.
That's
so
awesome.
I got various tools here. I got palette knives that I use and to mix my paint. Sometimes I put it on with palette knives. Sometimes for texture and stuff, I use all kinds of brushes, big brushes, little brushes. I use this as a medium to mix with my paint. It's called Liquin. I like it. And so I buy my canvases pre-stretched, and I draw everything out on a sketch pad before I paint. And then when I come up with an idea that I like, I get it sketched out in pencil, and then I sketch it onto the canvas, and away we go. I start with the sky color, and I work down. The sky color sets the tone and the mood for the whole painting. So you work on your sky first, at least I do, and then just come down and paint everything down. And then when I get to the bottom, I start over, and I come down and I refine everything, work more on everything for better color, better darks and lights, better anatomy, everything, just trying to improve everything down the second time. Then when I get done, I start over again, third time come down, and I just keep trying to improve it every time I come down. I always start at the top and work down, so that's how I do it.
That's awesome. Do you ever sketch out onto the canvas with pencil or anything, or you just start painting?
I sketch it all out on the canvas with a pencil from my little drawing. I hold my drawing in my hand, I look at it, I sketch on the canvas, copying my sketch and trying to improve it as I go. And then I usually outline everything in a light reddish brown paint and let that dry so that I've got everything where it's supposed to be, and then that's how I do it. So yeah.
And you primarily do Western scenes?
I do a lot of Western scenes. I probably do 70% Western. I do a lot of religious art, biblical art, and church history and stuff like that. And this is kind of a combination of church history and Western art combined with the handcart pioneers. My mother's grandfather was a handcart pioneer, so I was raised learning about the handcart pioneers. So I like to paint the handcart pioneers periodically. And so I've got this idea I'm working on, which shows handcart pioneers encountering a war party of Plains Indians and kind of the reaction between the two. And so I'm working on that. This is for a show in Texas.
Okay.
So, and I have a gallery. I still have the Trailside Gallery in Jackson I work with, and then other galleries in other places. And then I've got people commission me to do work, and then I have shows that I have to get ready for, art shows, and so it keeps me busy.
How much, I mean, it's just an estimate, but how much would like a painting like this sell for if it was in Trailside Gallery?
This painting here is 24 by 36, so it would probably sell for around 18,000.
Okay.
And sometimes it's more, sometimes a little bit less. Depends on the painting, but usually around 18,000.
Interesting. How many paintings do you try and sell a year?
As many as I can. I don't know. I sell probably, you know, big paintings like this. I would hope I could sell maybe 10 to 12 a year, something like that.
Okay. How many do you paint a year? Big paintings like this?
Yeah, it just depends. A lot of my paintings are smaller paintings, and some are bigger, but altogether I probably paint roughly 20, 25 paintings a year, maybe a little bit more, but like I say, some of them are quite a bit smaller than these. These take a long time. A good painting like this will take me about a month to paint, something like that.
Okay. Just working on it most days.
I always work. I'm working almost every day, but I switch. I rotate.
Okay.
I'll have like anywhere from 2 up to, I've had as many as I think 10 paintings going at the same time. So when I get tired of one, after 2-3 days, I'll switch, go to another painting, and I'll just rotate like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed that visit with Clark Kelly Price. I ended part 1 kind of abruptly there, so I want to close things up. There will be a part 2, and he'll take us around the studio and show us some details there. I love his story. I love the idea that he kind of put himself out there and took a chance and stepped away from what he was doing and to become an artist. And somebody at the gallery took a chance on him, and just life changed. And so for 50 years or so now, he's been painting, and he's a famous cowboy artist all over the world. He sends prints and so forth, and original paintings. So look forward to part 2 as we wander around his gallery and look at a lot of his different works, beautiful paintings, and he's a wonderful artist. So thanks for coming on this field trip, and look for part 2.